Happy Monday, everybody. Or, if you're listening on Tuesday, then happy Tuesday to you. If you've waited until Wednesday to listen to this, though, I have nothing to say to you. Nothing at all. I'm your friend Joseph Craven, joined as always by my co-host Radar O'Reilly, here for Week 10 edition of the Numbers Game on Running Up the Clock. That's where we just run through all the statistics, the scores, that sort of stuff from the past week, and look at what the numbers have to tell us. Look at the stories there. Not really any opinion here, just a whole lot of statistics, just a whole lot of looking at what people were able to do and breaking down what that means all in all. Let's look at the scores first and foremost. Auburn defeated Texas A&M 28-24 at the end of the game. South Carolina as well able to outlast Ole Miss 84, not quite, 48-44. Georgia defeated Kentucky 34-17 in a game that was not that close at all. Missouri also defeated Florida 38-17 in a very similar situation. Tennessee got by Charlotte 14-3. Mississippi State defeated La Tech 45-3, and Alabama shut out LSU 29-0. Let's look at the individual statistics from each matchup. And I tell you what, let's start with the non-conference games. There were two of them. Let's start with Tennessee and Charlotte. Tennessee got 14 points in the first quarter. Marquez Callaway opened up the scoring with an 82-yard punt return with 8 minutes to go in the first quarter. After that, Jarrett Guantano threw a 16-yard touchdown pass to Josh Palmer, and it seems like Tennessee really just kind of calmed things down. I hope that's the case. After that, the only scoring left in the game was a Jonathan Cruz 20-yard field goal for the Charlotte 49ers with 17 seconds to go in the first half, so a scoreless second half. Tennessee stats on the day: Jarrett Guarantano went 16 of 21 for 172 yards and one touchdown. Jeremy Banks, the running back for the Volunteers, had the ball 11 times, carried the ball 11 times for 24 yards, only 2.2 yards per carry. Tim Jordan, another running back, 4 carries for 18 yards. Yes, you heard that right. The two leading rushers for Tennessee in this game carried the ball 11 and 4 times. Through the air, as mentioned, Josh Palmer, that wide receiver, had 4 catches for 71 yards and 1 touchdown. Their tight end got in on the action with 3 catches. Dominique Wood-Anderson, he had 53 yards on the day. Marquez Callaway added 3 catches for 30 yards to go along with his 82-yard punt return earlier in the contest. As mentioned, not a very dominant outing from Tennessee. I don't know, weird stats to come out of that game. Not really sure what to make of any of that, outside of the fact that Tennessee just didn't seem to have the ball very much, maybe, or at the very least didn't seem to do much of anything with the ball. It should be noted, Charlotte, as far as FBS teams go, very good defense, 6th in FBS in rushing defense, only allowing 88.9 rushing yards a game. Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt said afterwards that he didn't feel like they really made any explosive plays and really struggled to be consistent running the football. That is not a good recipe for success. We did find a way to create a positive play on special teams, and that was probably the difference in the ball game, really. Charlotte, apparently a very good defense. They had, it's their 4th straight competition in which they held their opponent to 21 points or fewer. This time around, it actually came against an SEC opponent, so very interesting there for the Charlotte 49ers. Tennessee is hoping that's not a sign of things to come as they go into a big matchup this upcoming week, but looks like they might be it might have been looking ahead a little too early. Mississippi State defeated La Tech 45-3 in a game that many people, including myself, thought might be a little bit less of a dominant performance from the Bulldogs of Mississippi State against the Bulldogs of La Tech, but there it was. Nick Fitzgerald threw an 11-yard touchdown pass to Stephen Guidry to open up the scoring on the first drive of the game for Mississippi State. 4 plays, 70 yards in 2 minutes and 22 seconds. After that, they had an 8-play, 59-yard drive that ended with a 36-yard touchdown pass to Dedrick Thomas. Louisiana Tech got their only points on the day in the first quarter with the field goal And the Mississippi State Bulldogs ended the first quarter with the highlight of the game, a 23-yard pass dropped right over the defense to running back Kylan Hill for a touchdown. It was 21-3 at the end of the first quarter. Mississippi State continued to put in some more stats as the game went on to finish up 45-3. Let's look at those statistics. Nick Fitzgerald, the quarterback for Mississippi State, went 17 of 28 for 243 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. And pretty notably, all of those passing touchdowns were 10 yards out or more. It's not really, terribly uncommon to see, a touchdown pass from 10 yards, but it's very interesting to see it in an offense that under Dan Mullen for the past several years, pretty much the past decade, has always been get to the goal line and then run like a quarterback sneak or a running back through the middle. So it's interesting that the red zone offense for Mississippi State was a passing offense in this game. Maybe the transition into the Joe Moorhead offensive scheme is speeding along at this point. On the ground, Nick Fitzgerald also led the way with 107 rushing yards on 18 carries. Running back Nick Gibson had 2 carries for 64 yards, most of those coming off of one long play that he had in the second half that he almost took to the house but got caught from behind. Second string quarterback Keaton Thompson had 3 rushing attempts for 42 yards and 1 touchdown. That happened to be a 19-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. And senior running back Aries Williams, who we've not seen much of out of Mississippi State so far this season, had 2 carries, but also for 42 yards and 1 touchdown, as he had a 29-yard touchdown run in the third quarter. Running back Kylan Hill, the starter, had 5 carries for only 20 yards. As far as through the air, wide receiver Dedrick Thomas had 3 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. Senior wide receiver Jesse Jackson had 3 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown. And running back Kylan Hill added 5 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown. Along with that, a couple other people had 1 catch apiece. Justin Johnson, the tight end, 1 catch for 37 yards. Devontae Jason, a tight end / wide receiver, 1 catch for 17 yards. Maybe his first catch of the season, I think. He might have had a second one at some point in time, but not someone that has seen the field much. And Stephen Guidry had 1 catch, but it happened to be an 11-yard touchdown. That was it for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Getting back into the conference play, as mentioned, Texas A&M able to score late, 14 fourth-quarter points out of Auburn. Auburn scored over Texas A&M, 14 fourth-quarter points to take that 28-24 lead and hold on for the victory. This game was a very, very entertaining one. Auburn actually got the first touchdown in the game. In the first quarter, it was 7-3 at the end of 1, Auburn's way. Then Travion Williams had a 38-yard touchdown run for the Aggies in the beginning of the second to make it 10-7 A&M. Auburn was able to take the lead back about 10 minutes later. An 11-yard pass from Jarrett Stidham to Seth Williams. You'll need to remember Seth Williams' name, by the way. We will get to that in a little bit here. Before the half ended, there was a Travion Williams 14-yard reception for a touchdown. 17-14 at the half before Texas A&M jumped up to 24-14 lead in the third quarter off a Travion Williams run. The score would stay that way until almost 5 minutes left in the game when Auburn was able to score 2 touchdowns in the last 5 minutes to take that 28-24 lead and then hold off Texas A&M, including stripping quarterback Kellen Mond at the end of the game on a possible Hail Mary attempt, hold on to the victory. Kellen Mond for Texas A&M went 16 of 32 for 220 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Travion Williams had 17 carries for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Very notable stats, even if it is in a loss. Their freshman running back, Ja'Shawn Corbin, saw a decent amount of playing time with 10 carries for 50 yards. Kellen Mond added 31 yards on the ground. Travion Williams actually led the way in the receiving yardage numbers, which is not a great look in a passing offense. He had 5 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown. Their star tight end, Jay Sternberger, added 59 yards on 3 receptions. Beyond that, the Aggies did not have a huge amount of passing statistics, especially to their actual wideouts. On the other side of things, Jarrett Stidham led the way passing the ball for the Auburn Tigers, 18 of 29 for 239 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ryan Davis, a wide receiver, actually had one 20-yard touchdown pass. That was the opening touchdown in the game. He completed that pass to Sal Cannella to get Auburn on the board. The rushing statistics for Auburn are, well, it's rough. Their leading rusher was their go-to running back, Jatarvius Whitlow. He carried the ball 8 times, but only managed 16 yards. Their one rushing touchdown on the day was actually Chandler Cox, their fullback, who got that from 1 yard out. Otherwise, not much to talk about there. Through the air, however, Darius Slayton had 8 receptions for 107 yards. Ryan Davis added 75 yards on 5 receptions to go along with his 120-yard touchdown pass. It was Seth Williams, the freshman wide receiver, though, that had 2 receptions for 22 yards, both of them for touchdowns. He caught the 11-yard pass with 1:41 to go to give Auburn the lead. And because of that, Seth Williams gets some attention from the Southeastern Conference. As mentioned, tight end Sal Cannella added one 20-yard reception for a touchdown. South Carolina defeated Ole Miss 48-44. This was another game that wasn't decided until the very end. In fact, it was 44-34 to open up the fourth quarter. As Ole Miss opened up their lead, Isaiah Woolard got a 1-yard run. 14-15 left in the game. After that, however, South Carolina was able to get 2 touchdowns in the last 14 minutes to win 48-44. On the losing side of things, Jordan Ta'amu completed 31 of 46 passes for 379 yards for Ole Miss. At one point, he got a little shaken up, had to be subbed out. They put in his backup, Matt Corral. Matt Corral went 0 for 2. Running back Scotty Phillips had another good day on the ground, 21 carries for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jordan Ta'amu added 66 rushing yards and a touchdown. And as mentioned, Isaiah Woolard had 28 rushing yards on 6 attempts, 1 touchdown on the ground as well. Wide receiver Elijah Moore led the way. That's right, not A.J. Brown, not any of the names you're familiar with or you're expecting. It was freshman Elijah Moore who had a heck of a game. 11 receptions, 129 yards. A.J. Brown did, of course, have 115 yards on 6 receptions. Behind them, Dawson Knox, the tight end, added 2 catches for 43 yards. DeMarcus Lodge, 7 catches for 34 yards. Scotty Phillips, 2 catches for 28 yards out the backfield. And the tight end, Octavius Cooley, 1 reception, 15 yards. On the other side of things, though, Jake Bentley for South Carolina had himself a game, 22 of 32 passing for 363 yards and 2 touchdowns. Man, those quarterbacks were slinging the ball. Impressive passing numbers on both sides. Junior running back, Mon Denson, actually saw the most amount of carries for the South Carolina Gamecocks as their top running back, Rico Dowdle, was out with an injury, or had to go out with an injury. Denson had 11 carries for a clean 100 yards. However, it was their normal second string running back, Tyson Williams, who had 7 carries for 30 yards and 1 of the touchdowns on the day for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Two other rushing touchdowns were scored. One by A.J. Turner. He actually got one of those fourth quarter scores from 3 yards out. He added 17 yards on the ground, and Jake Bentley had 1 rushing touchdown as well. The highlight of the whole weekend was, of course, the long touchdown pass to wide receiver Brian Edwards that he caught around the back of a defender. Very impressive play. He took that thing, I believe, 73 yards to the house. 75 yards. I just saw it right there. He had 4 receptions for 109 yards and that 1 touchdown on the day. Tyson Williams, the running back, 3 catches for 105 yards. Very, very useful player right there, Tyson Williams, to have the rushing touchdown and over 100 yards receiving. A wide receiver by the name of Shee Smith, 3 catches for 82 yards. One of their biggest playmakers, Deebo Samuel, only had 3 catches for 17 yards, but he's a notable player in particular because of what he did on special teams. He opened up the game with a 90-yard kickoff return, and also had another good return later in the game that set him up for victory. We'll talk more about that later on. One more passing touchdown was credited to the Gamecocks. That one went to Josh Vann, a freshman wide receiver. He had 3 catches for 13 yards. Georgia defeated Kentucky 34-17. At one point, this game was 31-10. Georgia just kind of in control. Kentucky did not get a touchdown until 3:45 left in the third quarter. At that point, it was 28-3, and then they scored from 9 yards out. The Kentucky Wildcats were led by quarterback Terry Wilson. He went 23 of 29 for 226 yards passing, 1 touchdown on the day. Running back Benny Snell Jr. held again under 100 yards, 20 attempts, 73 yards, 1 touchdown. However, Wilson, the quarterback, only added 12 yards on the ground, which is most people believe that to be his strength more so than his passing for sure. Through the air, they were led by a couple of players with 50-plus receiving yards. Running back Asim Rose caught 4 passes for 59 yards and a touchdown. And that freshman of the week, not freshman, he's a sophomore. He's special teams player of the week from last week, Lynn Bowden Jr., the wide receiver, added 6 catches for 52 yards. Behind them, there were a couple of players with a few stats of note. Isaiah Epps, wide receiver, 2 catches, 29 yards. Taven Richardson, another wide receiver, 2 catches, 26 yards. And their tight end, CJ Conrad, 3 catches for 22 yards. However, the victory was controlled by the Georgia Bulldogs. Their quarterback, Jake Fromm, went 14 of 20. Only 113 yards, 1 passing touchdown because Georgia got all their business done on the ground. Running back DeAndre Swift, 16 rushing attempts for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. And not to be outdone, Elijah Holyfield, 18 rushing attempts for 115 yards and 1 touchdown. Very impressive stats there on the ground. Through the air, not necessarily much to take note of. Jeremiah Holloman had 4 catches for 39 yards. Riley Ridley, 3 for 37. It was their tight end, Isaac Noata, who had the 1 4-yard touchdown reception to be their only passing touchdown on the day. That one opened things up. That was the first touchdown of the day. And as mentioned, DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield really carried things, including DeAndre Swift having an 83-yard touchdown run in the third quarter to put the Bulldogs up 28-3. More on DeAndre Swift a little bit later on. Missouri, caught Florida napping. 38-17, and this game at one point in time was a 28-10 lead. No, I'm sorry, a 35-10 lead for the Missouri Tigers. Florida's offense really not able to get anything going until late in the game when they benched starting quarterback Felipe Franks to, try to save him from having to continue in the game. And his backup, Kyle Trask, actually got the offense moving a little bit. The Florida Gators, let's look at their offensive stats first and foremost. There's not a huge amount to talk about in a game which they struggled. But as mentioned, Kyle Trask came in to lead the way through the air, 10 of 18 passing for 126 yards and 1 touchdown, leading some to wonder if maybe he should get more playing time as the season goes on, or if this was just a flash-in-the-pan thing. Felipe Franks, up till that point, had only gone 9 of 22 for 84 yards passing. Another back-to-back rough performance from Franks after what had been a very solid year, especially in the passing touchdowns department. Running back LaMichael Pirine carried the ball 10 times for 42 yards. Jordan Scarlett added 6 attempts for 33. Kadarius Toney, another one of those, it seems like innumerable Florida running backs, added 3 carries for 23 yards, and Felipe Franks had 3 rushing attempts for 17 yards and 1 touchdown. That came towards the end of the second quarter. He ran the ball in from 3 yards out. Through the air, that running back Kadarius Toney had 2 catches for 72 yards, and Josh Hammond, wide receiver, added 5 catches for 48 yards and the 1 passing touchdown on the day. Wide receiver Van Jefferson added 4 catches for 33 yards. And Trevon Grimes added 2 catches for 23 yards for the Gators. On the other side of things, Missouri's gunslinger Drew Lock completed 24 of 32 passing for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. A very, very solid performance there, and he gets some accolades, some attention because of that. On the ground, however, is Demaria Crockett of the Tigers and Larry Roundtree III, who really excelled. Crockett, 21 rushing attempts, 114 yards, 1 touchdown. Roundtree, 72 yards on 14 attempts, 1 touchdown as well. Through the air, the oft-injured Missouri receiving corps had the return of senior Emmanuel Hall. Emmanuel Hall had 4 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. Could not have come back any sooner. Another wide receiver, Jonathan Johnson, a junior out of Memphis, Tennessee, added 5 catches for 47 yards. Their breakout star tight end, Albert Okwegbunam, had 4 catches for 46 yards, 1 touchdown. And a freshman wide receiver, Cam Scott, only had 1 catch on the day, but it happened to be early in the third quarter, a 41-yard touchdown pass that put the Tigers up 28-10. And you got to think that might have been the nail in the coffin of sorts, considering Florida was able to get a touchdown right before halftime to maybe try to get some momentum. Missouri silencing that momentum early in the third quarter with that particular touchdown. The final game to talk about is Alabama handling LSU 29-0. Alabama going up against the toughest opponent that they have faced this season and clearly wanting to send a message that they don't care what you are ranked. They want to shut you out. Yikes. LSU did not really, it seemed like they didn't have the ball. And when they did, they didn't have very much going for them. Forced to throw the ball a whole lot. Joe Burrow, their quarterback, went 18 of 35 for 184 yards, 1 interception on the day. They're normally ground and pound focused offense, unable to move the ball. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 6 rushing attempts for only 14 yards. Nick Brossette, 7 for only 5 yards. Joe Burrow, -7 yards on the day. Their go-to wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, had 6 receptions for 81 yards. But behind him, Clyde Edwards-Helaire added 2 for 38 yards. A wide receiver by the name of D. Anderson added 2 for 32 yards. Terrace Marshall Jr., 1 12-yard reception. And that's about it for the LSU Tigers on offense. On the other side of things, preseason Heisman Trophy winner, multiple preseason Heisman Trophy winner, Tua Tagovailoa went 25 of 42 for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So as it turns out, he is human. Running back Damian Harris added 19 carries for 107 yards and a touchdown. Najee Harris, 6 carries, 83 yards. Tua carried the ball 3 times for 49 yards and 1 touchdown. That was actually a 44-yard touchdown run in the third quarter to put the Crimson Tide up 22-0. It was a scramble where everything opened up. The most impressive play of the day probably for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Tua able to finally show off his legs, put on the jets a little bit. Don't get a chance to see that very much. To show his speed. But he ran the ball 44 yards for a touchdown. Through the air, Jerry Jeudy, no surprise here, led the Crimson Tide with 8 receptions for 103 yards. It was wide receiver Irv Smith Jr. that had 1 of the receiving touchdowns on the day. He also had 64 yards on 4 catches. Henry Ruggs III had the other receiving touchdown. He had 55 yards on 4, not carries, but rather catches. So what does any of this mean as far as the rankings go, as far as the standings in the SEC? Well, of course, the East and West are both locked down now. That has been decided. Georgia has won the East. Alabama has won the West. They were the favorites going into things, and it seems like no surprise that they have stayed on top of things. Even when things maybe looked a little bit shaky at times in the East, maybe someone could put up a fight, they remain kind of relatively unchallenged. Let's look at the polls, therefore. In the AP poll, not a huge amount of change. AP and coaches, Alabama, of course, stays on top in the number 1 spot, both polls. Georgia has climbed up to number 5 in the AP. They already were number 5 in the coaches. LSU drops down to number 9 in the AP poll out of the top 5. But they drop all the way down to number 10 in the coaches poll to make room for Washington State. Kentucky is number 12 in both polls. That's 1 spot down in the AP, but they remain unchanged in the coaches. Mississippi State climbs up 3 spots to number 18 in the AP poll. However, they climb up 6 spots to number 15 in the coaches poll. A lot of movement in the coaches, it looks like, for them. Number 19 in the AP are the Florida Gators, right behind Mississippi State. They dropped down 6 spots. They dropped 7 spots in the coaches down to number 21. And after that, Texas A&M and Auburn are the 2 teams that are getting some top 25 votes in the AP. In the coaches poll as well, Auburn, Texas A&M, but Missouri and South Carolina also getting a few votes in the coaches poll. However, at this point, the college football playoff rankings are out there. They have not been updated since this past weekend, but as noted, Alabama and LSU were opened up in the top 4. Georgia was right outside at number 6. Kentucky was at number 9. Florida, number 11. Mississippi State, number 18. Texas A&M, number 20. That's in the playoff poll, at least the opening playoff poll. It's time to go over the SEC's Players of the Week. We have co-offensive Players of the Week, one being quarterback Drew Lock from Missouri. This was Missouri's first road win over a ranked team since 2014. He, of course, added 250 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. Very convincing victory. No turnovers against Florida. This is notable because Florida was ranked 8th nationally in terms of causing turnovers. Along with that, Florida has been very efficient, top 25 passing efficiency defense in the nation. He was able to knock a 171.56 QB rating against them. His career has been very, very good. He is 3rd place on the SEC's career touchdowns chart with 90, passing Tim Tebow, according to the SEC's press release on this. I don't know who Tim Tebow is, but Drew Lock has passed him. Tim Tebow, Chris Leak, both 88 passing touchdowns on their careers, and Peyton Manning with 89 passing touchdowns on his college career. Lock has also moved to number 6th on the SEC's career passing yardage rankings. 11,089 passing yards for his career. He moved past Florida's Danny Werfel. So he moved past Tim Tebow, Chris Leak, and Danny Werfel in different statistical categories, as if beating Florida wasn't enough, Rough stuff. The co-offensive player of the week was Georgia's running back DeAndre Swift. He had a career-high 157 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging 9.8 yards per carry. He also included that, as mentioned, 83-yard touchdown run that really, really sealed everything for Georgia. I'm just kidding. That game was pretty much over at that point in time. The defensive player of the week was Alabama's defensive lineman Quinnen Williams. He was also named the Walter Camp National Defensive Player of the Week. Led the team with 10 total tackles, including 7 solo tackles. Wow. Along with that, he had 2.5 sacks to his credit, 3.5 tackles for loss, as the Crimson Tide limited LSU to 12 total rushing yards and 5 sacks. LSU also punted on their first 9 drives in that game. Deebo Samuel from South Carolina was the special teams player of the week. He took the opening kickoff 90 yards to the end zone. It was his 4th career kickoff return for a touchdown, which is the most in South Carolina history. In the 4th quarter, as Ole Miss had a 10-point advantage, he returned a kick 38 yards to get inside Ole Miss territory. South Carolina scored on that drive. For the day, Deebo Samuel had 5 kick returns for 178 yards, a 35.6 yard per return average. Wide receiver Seth Williams of Auburn. I'm sorry, my co-host Radar O'Reilly loves to hide her chew toys around the house. And as she figures out where to hide them, she walks around with them in her mouth and whines very loudly. So there you go. That's what she's trying to do. Auburn's Seth Williams was the freshman of the week. He had 2 catches. Both of them, though, were for 11-yard touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown late in that 4th quarter against Texas A&M. He's the first freshman to catch 2 touchdown passes in a game since Ronnie Daniels in 1999. Georgia freshman Ronnie Daniels did. He's also the first. This is the stat they have listed in the press release. Here we go. First freshman to score a game-winning touchdown in the 4th quarter or later to win a game since Cody Burns in the 2007 Chick-fil-A Bowl. That's just a mouthful. Those sorts of stats always crack me up. Oddly enough, we have co-offensive linemen of the week. Jonah Williams of Alabama and Andrew Thomas of Georgia both anchored their team's productions. Jonah Williams had 6 knockdown blocks for the second straight game, and his third time this season that he's had 6 knockdown blocks. Whew. Wow. He did not allow a sack or a pressure or commit a penalty. He has not allowed a sack in 335 plays from scrimmage this season. Andrew Thomas of Georgia registered 3 knockdown blocks, missed no assignments. UK's defense came into this game as the top-ranked scoring defense and also a very, very stout rushing defense. And Georgia was able to run all over the place against Kentucky. 444 yards of total offense against that very, very good Kentucky defense. So Andrew Thomas was the anchor of all of that. The defensive lineman of the week was Nick Coe of Auburn. He had 3 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and he forced a fumble on the last play of the game, which sealed the victory. All of his tackles were on 3rd or 4th down. So there you go. Those are your standout players of the week. We're going to real quick run through the statistical leaders of the season so far. There's not a whole lot of changes in a lot of these. Your top 5 passing yardage, Mississippi's Jordan Ta'amu has 3,001 yards, the first SEC quarterback this season to cross the 3,000-yard mark. Drew Lock of Missouri is behind him, 2,394 yards. Tua Tagovailoa in 3rd place with 2,361 yards. Kellen Mond of Texas A&M has 2,252, and Kyle Shermer of Vanderbilt's in 5th place with 2,037. Those are also the only 5 quarterbacks that have over 2,000 passing yards in the SEC right now. Tua Tagovailoa leads the conference in passing touchdowns with 27. Drew Lock of Missouri is in 2nd place with 19. Jake Fromm of Georgia, 17 in 3rd place. And Jordan Ta'amu and Felipe Franks of Florida are tied in 4th and 5th place with 16 touchdowns on the year so far. As far as rushing yardage and attempts go, Benny Snell's the leader in both categories. He has 1,033 rushing yards. Travion Williams of Texas A&M in 2nd place, 931. Scotty Phillips of Ole Miss, 923. Nick Fitzgerald, the quarterback of Mississippi State, 839. And Nick Brossette of Louisiana State University, 702 yards in 5th place there. As mentioned, Snell, Travion Williams, Nick Brossette, Nick Fitzgerald, and Scotty Phillips that's the top 5 as far as rushing attempts go. But Benny Snell is 1 rushing attempt away from 200 rushing attempts on the season. Scotty Phillips of Ole Miss is the league leader in rushing touchdowns with 12. Travion Williams, Benny Snell, and Nick Brossette are tied behind him with 10 rushing touchdowns. And then there's also a tie in 5th place. Nick Fitzgerald of Mississippi State and Larry Roundtree III of Missouri have 9 rushing touchdowns. As far as receiving yards go, A.J. Brown of Ole Miss is in the number 1 spot with 920 receiving yards. Jerry Jeudy of Alabama, 880 behind him. Khalija Lipscomb of Vanderbilt, 632 receiving yards. DeMarcus Lodge of Ole Miss, 584. And DK Metcalf is still in 5th place with 569 yards. He will be passed up this coming week because he has been injured and out for the season. But he actually amassed so many yards in the time that he played this year that he is still in the top 5 in receiving yards in the conference. That is incredible. Hope you get better soon, DK Metcalf. The conference needs you. As far as receiving touchdowns, Jerry Jeudy has 10 to lead the conference. Henry Ruggs III of Alabama is in 2nd place with 8. So those two are the guys that Tua loves to pass to. And then you've got a big tie behind them with 6 receiving touchdowns on the year. That's held by Jace Sternberger, the tight end of Texas A&M, Khalija Lipscomb of Vanderbilt, Brian Edwards of South Carolina, Albert Okwuegbunam of Missouri, and Irv Smith Jr. also of Alabama. Defensively speaking, Dejon Harris of Arkansas still leads the conference in total tackles with 93. Jordan Griffin of Vanderbilt has 91. Devin White of LSU has 84. Cale Garrett and Deshaun Davis, Garrett of Missouri, Davis of Auburn, are tied with 81 tackles behind them. And it should be noted here, if you listen to our big episode this week, and Chandler gave credit to Ole Miss's Mohamed Sanogo for being a very consistent defensive player on what has been a bad defense this season. He is 6th in the conference in tackles, so more praise is deserved by Mohamed Sanogo, especially considering his nickname is Momo Sanogo. As far as sacks go, we have a tie. The leaders, Montez Sweat of Ole Miss, of Mississippi State, and Josh Allen of Kentucky both have 10. Isaiah Buggs of Alabama has 9. Ja'Kai Polite of Florida and Nick Coe of Auburn are tied with 7. And then behind them, it is listed as having 7 sacks, which probably means they have 6.5 sacks, and it's rounded up. Kingsley Keke of Texas A&M and Christian Miller of Alabama. Grant Delpete of Louisiana State still leads the conference with 5 interceptions. Jojon Williams of Vanderbilt, John Battle of LSU, Rashad Fenton of South Carolina, Darius West of Kentucky, Ryan Pooley of Arkansas, Savion Smith of Alabama, and Bryce Thompson of Tennessee all have 3 interceptions. Christian Holmes of Missouri leads the way with 9 passes defended so far on the year. DeMarcus Acey of Missouri, J.C. Horn of South Carolina, Cameron Dantzler of Mississippi State, Christian Fulton of Louisiana State, and DeAndre Baker of Georgia, 8 pass defenses behind them. Those are your statistical leaders. If you want to look at more of those, all of these stats come from sportsreference.com, my favorite sports website, because it's nothing but just numbers. It's numbers everywhere. It's incredible. But they give you all kinds of statistical leaders for the conference, from passing efficiency rating to leaders in plays from scrimmage, field goals, punting, kickoff returns, all of the above. If you're interested in any of that, go check them out. I'm going to go see what it is that my co-host Radar O'Reilly has started yelling at in the living room. I'm your friend Joseph Craven. Thank you for listening to Week 10's episode of The Numbers Game here on Running Out the Clock.